Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Garo Martirosyan. That's Mardirosissian. I'm with the firm of Martirosyan and Alkaragian. We're based in Los Angeles. We do handle a significant amount of civil rights cases. So we're here today because the Orange County District Attorney's Office just issued a report that we've all been waiting for. We've been waiting for it for a long time. If you recall, this incident where Hector Hernandez was executed just 4 houses away from here by a corporal with the Fullerton Police Department, a canine unit officer, occurred 2 days after George Floyd's murder. 2 days after, here we are. No one's been charged. We were promised that we'd hear from the Orange County DA's office by now. They waited and waited and waited, and now they came up with a report that is absolutely disgusting and misleading. In that report, they come in and they tell us things that we know did not occur. The witnesses that were there know it didn't occur. The videos we have show that the Orange County DA's office is just trying to cover up and mislead the public into what happened that day. They do that by first trying to smear the victim. Hector Hernandez was a father of 2 who had a steady job for over 14 years as manager at U-Haul warehouse. He did repairs of different kinds of vehicles, different kinds of trailers. He'd been at work every day. They loved him at work. The people at work are disgusted by what happened. And like I said, 2 days after George Floyd's perpetrators that killed George Floyd have been not only charged but tried and sentenced. And yet nothing had happened here until we just got this report from the Orange County DA's office basically saying Officer Ferrell, the canine operator, the canine officer, gets a pass. What he did is okay with us. Well, it's not okay with the people that are here today, the people in this neighborhood, in Fullerton, in Orange County, because far too many young Latino men are being killed and no one's being charged. And all that does, it gives that next officer, the okay to do it because the DA is not going to charge him. We think that another body should be reviewing these, should be investigating these, not the DA's office, who constantly has to work with the same police officers. It should be the Attorney General, and better yet, it should be federal investigators that investigate these kinds of executions of young Latino men. Lil Aiden and Lil Cohen don't have a father anymore, and they love that dad. He was their hero. What's even worse is that after Hector Hernandez was shot twice in the chest that perforated his heart. Both shots went into his heart, and he's bleeding out. And they walk little Hayden right by his dad as he's being bled out. Just unthinkable, unthinkable. That man, Hector Hernandez, should be alive here today, should not be dead. There was no reason to have shot and killed him. I'm going to go through this little presentation, and it starts out by telling you that the Orange County DA's office misleads the public. What you're going to see next is that Orange County DA in their report claimed that Victor, who was living on the property that Hector had given him that home to live in, because Victor had his own issues in getting a place to live and actually works at U-Haul. So Victor was living there. When the police first arrived, and they arrived because there was a domestic abuse call, when the police arrived, Hector came out and went back in. But Victor came out first. Victor came out with his hands up, kept his hands up. They directed him to do certain things, but they got information from him, clear information about what was going on. They claimed Victor told Officer Ferrell, who was the first officer at the scene, that there's a young boy trapped inside the home with Hector. That is a lie. Victor never told him that. Victor told him quite the opposite of that. And here's what Victor actually told Officer Ferrell, the canine officer that executed Hector Hernandez.
House.
Okay, it says right there. Ask whether there's anyone else in the house. He says everybody's inside is okay, sir. He's talking to Ferrell.
They're okay?
And he says, yeah, they just had a confrontation. They're already outside of the house. They're over there in the corner. Everything diffused. You know what I mean? All of the whole situation is diffused. Everything is good. Go home, officers. We don't need you anymore. But if you're going to stick around, please treat us like human beings. So they take this statement that everything is diffused, they turn it around and suggest that somehow Victor told them there's a young boy inside that house that's trapped that may be held hostage. Nothing could be further from the truth. His biological son, Hayden, was inside, and Hector had gone inside to be with him, to protect him, and then came back out with his hands up. The whole time, Hector had his hands up. The only order he ever received was keep your hands up, and he did exactly what he was commanded to do, kept his hands up. And then Officer Ferrell, with his canine dog, Rotor, comes up to the property. Before he gets onto the property, releases the dog to go attack Hector with his hands up. For no reason, no provocation, no reason at all. There was no command presence. There was no communication. There were half a dozen to a dozen or more officers there. They were yelling over one another. The only time they say, Hector, get back to the street, is at the same time that the canine is released. And the canine was smart enough to see man with his hands up. That's no danger. That's no threat. Canine ran the opposite direction to his canine unit. And then you hear Ferrell yelling at the dog, commanding him to come back, and directing him to go and attack an innocent man who has his hands up. And the dog comes to attack him, and dog grabs him, and a dog bite is very, very painful. In the meantime, Hector always has a pocket knife in his pocket in self-defense, and every one of us have a right to defend ourselves when excessive use is used against us, whether it's by a police officer or anyone else. When there's excessive use, you have a right to self-defense. And so he grabbed that pocket knife and he tried to stop that dog from mauling him to death. And when that dog yelped, immediately Ferrell shot 2 shots into the heart of Hector Hernandez, killing him. That dog is nothing more than a weapon. It is not a cuddly puppy. You know, our pets at home, we all love dogs. But this dog is trained to do one thing only, and that is really to prevent these things from happening. They're there to deter these things from occurring. And yet, Officer Ferrell released him to attack. No reason to release him. He could have kept that dog on a leash. It would have had the effect that dog could have performed appropriately under these circumstances. Instead, they released this dog, and the dog, after being misdirected, he went right after Hector, and Hector tried his best to stop that dog from harming him any further, and got shot twice. As I indicated, even the DA's office clearly says that Ferrell would have had no right to shoot Hector Hernandez just because his dog was injured. That dog suffered a minor, few stitches, flesh wound, and was retired. And I'll talk about that a little more. He wasn't retired because of wounds. He was retired because he didn't follow commands and ran away instead of going after Hector initially, because that dog was smart enough to know there's no danger, there's no threat. Ferrell wasn't that smart. So, canine Rotor is released by Officer Ferrell without provocation, and you'll see that in this video. See, there's a dog released before they get onto the parkway. Now, that dog runs the opposite direction. There's Ferrell yelling, here, Rotor. That dog was smart. He knew there was no danger, but not Ferrell. Not Ferrell. Ferrell was out there. I don't know why he was out there, quite frankly. He was out there. He was going to do something. He was going to do something big. And he did. He took the life of a father, a young man. Hector Hernandez stands in front of the front yard with his hands up. Canine Rotor attacks Hector. He tries to defend himself. Rotor yelps. Ferrell shoots Hector twice in the heart in response. Here's a picture of where Hector was in the videos that I provide you. You'll see this. He was in this position the whole time, both hands all the way up in the air, in a position of surrendering. He's doing everything he can to let him know, I'm no threat. I'm no threat. And yet, they release a vicious dog to maul him, and he attempts to protect himself. And in return, he gets 2 bullets in the heart from a law enforcement officer that's supposed to be there to protect him, to protect all of us. Disgusting. And here he is. Here he is with his hands up the whole time. You hear the dog yell? Right as he yelps, shots are fired. 2 shots. Now, they claim that somehow the fear was that Hector was going to go back in the house and take his own son hostage. Completely unfounded. No evidence of that. He never made a move to go into that house. The house was behind him. He's many steps in front of that house with his hands up. Never turned around. Never reached for the door. His hands up. And they release the dog and shoot and kill him. For no good reason. No good reason. No good legal reason. This was criminal. And Ferrell should have been charged. Charged with something, anything, so that it deters other officers from doing the same thing. So, Officer Ferrell, again, this is in the OCDA's report. Officer Ferrell claimed being 1 foot away from the knife. That's his justification. Later on, he writes a report. This is what the OCDA reports, of course, is that there's a handwritten report or a report by Ferrell saying, I had to defend myself because Hector had a knife and that knife was within 1 foot of me. Another lie. At no time was Hector within 1 foot of Ferrell. As a matter of fact, this video will show you that Hector was 3.5 feet away at the closest distance when that dog was on top of him. And at no time was he a danger to Ferrell. At no time. See, here's the 3.5 foot. They were supposed to have given him a warning. After Hernandez was shot in the heart twice, face down in the dirt, he was ordered to show his hands. He's dying. He can't move. They're ordering him to show his hands. And before that, they were supposed to have given him a chance. They're supposed to tell him, hey, we're going to use deadly force. We're warning you. They never did that. They never did that. And this is where they say, show us your hand. He's on the ground, sprawled out, face down, in the dirt. 2 bullets through his heart, and they want him to show his hands now. And they handcuff him in that position, and then they give this faint effort to revive him by giving him chest compressions for the next 5-10 minutes, which is completely useless when you got 2 bullets going through your heart. The time to revive his life was before they put bullets into his heart. The Penal Code Section 835A requires that an officer must warn that deadly force may be used before deadly force is used. That was never done. Never done here. To rub salt into their wounds, they gifted this dog to Canine Officer Ferrell after all this was done. They had a big gathering. They congratulated him on now taking this dog home to be his personal pet. and they just wanted $1 from him, so that it was going to be quid pro quo, an exchange, a fair exchange, and he gets to keep that dog now, a vicious dog, as a pet. Is that a smart thing to do? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, today's LA Times reports a 5-year-old little boy who's blind was bit in the face by another retired dog that was taken home. There was another case that came down with a $20 million verdict where another retired dog was given to an officer. That dog got loose, killed a person by tearing his arm off, and seriously injured another for a $20 million verdict. These dogs are weapons. They're not pets. And they should not be given to people to keep in communities where people can be hurt. Here's a picture again of little Hayden, Cohen, and Hector. Like I say, this neighborhood, everybody loved Hector. Whenever there was a gathering of any kind, whether it's Thanksgiving, July the 4th celebrations, Christmas, New Year's, his home was the epicenter where everybody goes to have fun. He's got go-karts, he's got games on the TV, and they loved Hector. Now Hector's gone. This community bleeds. This community is looking for an answer. We're not getting it from the OCDA's office. We're hoping the Attorney General or the FBI will conduct an investigation, a fair investigation, and charge this officer for a crime. I can take some questions if anyone has any. I'm sorry? Okay.
Shots at his own children or
Right.
stepchildren. And don't you have to take it all into context?
Oh, yes.
He's driving even when the officer above him and doesn't know what he has on at that point.
Right, so let's address that one by one. First of all, they did everything they could to smear Hector after they killed him. It is true that the police arrived because there was a call, and they needed to arrive because there were shots fired into the front lawn and into the air, just 2 shots, and then the officers fired 2 shots. Then there was an allegation that he had somehow beat up his children. The fact is that when he got home that day, these were not his children that we're talking about. His girlfriend had brought over 4 other kids to live with him. One of them is not the biological child of anybody around. He was just somebody that was out in the streets, didn't have a place to stay, and Hector gave him the opportunity to stay there. When he came home from this graduation party that evening, he had a couple of drinks, and it's his own home. And he's trying to sit down at a couch, and there's an argument about who gets to sit down there. And so these kids that are from 15 to 19 years old end up beating up Hector. That's why Victor says he had been beat up earlier, because those kids beat him up. And Hector had to get him off him and threaten him with that gun to stop those children of his girlfriend from beating him up in his own home. That's why the calls were made. Got shots fired, yes. Man tried to get those kids off him, that's true. But he has committed no crime. And yes, discharging a weapon could be a crime, but he didn't have a weapon when the police arrived. The pocket knife he had in his pocket, they didn't even know he had until he pulled it out.
But he had it.
Yes, in his pocket. You have a right to carry a pocket knife. A 2-inch or 3-inch pocket knife in your pocket is not illegal. And even then, he did not touch that pocket knife, didn't pull it until after the dog was mauling him. And you have a right to grab whatever you can, a knife, a gun, anything, to stop excessive illegal use of force against you. And that's what he did. So they had a right to arrest him if they wanted to, no problem. They have a probable cause to arrest him, but not to shoot him and kill him. So all that happened before had been diffused, like Victor told them. Victor knew, and the neighbors knew. All the neighbors were shocked that they heard gunshot wounds after the police arrived.
When you respond to a 911 call and the shots have been fired, someone's got a knife and a threatening people, you
Yeah.
just can't take someone's word for it. You
That-
oh, it's all good now.
Right, you don't. You don't take their word for it, but you look at the action of this so-called individual that's dangerous. The only action they see is hands up. He never reaches for anything. He never walks away. He's just got his hands up the whole time. Then they release the dog. Then he has to try to protect himself from being mauled by a dog. So officers were doing their job up until that point. They weren't doing their job well in terms of communication. Nobody took verbal control. You're supposed to say, all right, here's the command guy. He's going to control this whole situation. None of that ever happened. Strategically, this was bundled up. It was like Keystone Cops right here in Fullerton. We're not talking about the days where we had Keystone Cops in these old black and white movies. We're talking about real cops that are supposed to be trained to diffuse the situation, like Victor told them. It's diffused. Don't accelerate. Don't make it worse.
Given that the California Attorney General's office in the past did nothing about the police department, do you have any confidence that the California Police
I have hope. The question is, do I have any confidence that the Attorney General's office will do anything, given that the Orange County DA's office has been somewhat relaxed when it comes to bringing charges against their own officers, except in Kelly Thomas, where they did. And I give Rikakis credit for doing that. Spitzer came into office, and some of the Kelly Thomas Army people wanted Spitzer because Spitzer was saying the right things. But when push came to shove and he had to make the right call, he did not make the right call here. I know he's running for office, and hopefully whoever is in office next will take another look at this in terms of Fullerton is concerned. Look at the OCDA's report and look at the glaring mistakes and correct them and reconsider charging him. If not, Attorney General, if not the FBI, we are pleading that they do something about this so we don't have more Latino young men, fathers, being shot to death with no recourse, with no crime being charged. It's like a free pass. Oh, see, okay, the question is, once Ferrell saw that the dog was being hurt by Hector while the dog is biting him, he should have just walked away. He should have at most grabbed the leash and pulled that dog off. Never discharge your weapon. This is a chattel. This is like a piece of furniture. I understand dogs are beautiful animals and we love them, but this is not that kind of a dog. This is a killer dog. And when a killer dog is mauling a human being, you pull the killer dog off the human being. You don't kill the human being with 2 bullets through his heart. There's no reason for that. It's just chattel.
In his comment on camera where he said, I thought he was coming after me, do you believe that was just said? Tell me what you believe about
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, they do their own editorializing. When you listen to what he said in the first submission that the Fullerton Police Department gave us, it's clear he's talking about the dog gets stabbed. So he says he got stabbed, then he came after me. It's clear that he means the dog came after him. But now they want to twist that around and say, no, Hector came after him. Well, we got it on video. We see Hector didn't come after him. Hector is at no time less than 3.5 feet away, and his arm doesn't reach that far. And he's on his back with a dog mauling him. This is all made up. This is all an excuse to not bring charges against Officer Ferrell, against Corporal Ferrell. Oh, because it's, if you look at the pronoun, the word he is used twice because it's he got stabbed, then he came after me. Not he got stabbed, then Hector came after me. Not he got stabbed, then the guy with the knife came after me. No, the dog. That only makes sense. I mean, it's really a clear interpretation of that sentence when you don't take their editorializing. Listen to it, and I think you'll agree with me.
In the report, the DA cites, I think they call it a heightened sense of fear on the part of Ferrell. Is that something that you've run across?
Yeah, what we run into often is officers that claim that they're feared for their lives, and that's why they have to kill an innocent person. Or they'll start yelling, stop resisting, even after the guy's dead. stop resisting. They will put handcuffs on a person that's bled out and completely motionless and dead because that's protocol. And yet, you know, we have to remember these are citizens. We have to treat them with humanity, with compassion. These are the people that are hiring you to protect them, not put bullets through their heart. And so, yeah, listen, we're all for law enforcement, don't get me wrong. Vast majority of law enforcement do their jobs and do an amazingly good job. There are just a few bad apples that don't belong on the force, that are still on the force, that immediately resort to deadly force unnecessarily, escalating the situation where they could have done what Victor told them. It's all diffused, man. It's all cool. You know, if you want to arrest him, arrest him. He's got his hands up. He's ready. The only time they tell him to go down or back up into the street is after that dog is released. And it's too late by then, because that dog is going to let go. And Hector has a right to protect himself, and he got shot for it.
In the report, the DA refers to the attempt to use the dog as an attempt at using non-deadly force tactically. Is that something you agree with? Our dogs can be used as a tactical doing deadly force in your opinion?
Dogs can be used as deterrents. You see a dog on a leash barking, growling, and if you're going to do something stupid, you're going to maybe stop doing it. And that, in that sense, they play a very important role. But when you release that dog, now you're saying, I'm letting that dog use deadly force. That dog now can kill, and they do. And so before you release that dog, you have to be 100% certain that somebody else's life is in danger. Not some chattel, not some dog's life, but some human being's life is in danger. And we didn't have that here. So there's this feigned suggestion that he was concerned about his own life. He wasn't. He was concerned about the dog's life, and that's not good enough legal cause to shoot a human being. It just isn't.
Two places in the report, Officer Ferrell says he uses two different terms about Hector swinging a knife. It's not anything that a county court handed from the case. Do you believe that Hector was swinging a knife in any way that would have threatened Officer Ferrell, or was he swinging the knife at all?
He was never swinging a knife. He actually, when he pulled that little pocket knife out of his pocket, and there were a stab wound in the shoulder blade area of the dog on its back, and it was a very shallow wound, very small wound. They got it stitched up, and the dog was fine. There was no problem with the dog, and there was no swinging of any knife. You could see it on the video. I mean, you could see his hand movement, and at no time was any human being, any officer in danger. Is that a question? Can you speak up, please?
Do you perceive there being a racial component to this?
Well, I hope there's not a racial component, but you can't help but, connect the dots and say, why are all these Latino men getting shot to death? Look, Kelly Thomas wasn't, Latino. I get it. And I don't think white or black or Latino or any color human being should be killed by a police officer. Only as a last resort, when your own life or the life of somebody else is in imminent danger, do you use that kind of force. And we didn't have that here. Yeah, I do believe that poorer people, people of color, are far more likely to get killed by police officers. Is that right? Is that wrong? It's wrong. There's no doubt. That's wrong. One more question and then let somebody else speak. Yes.
Okay, so I'm wondering what effect this report has on the family's civil case against the police.
We're very disappointed with the report. The effect the report will... No, not your fault. I think I missed... You wanna do it? Okay. Yeah.
Bad placement.
Thank you. All right, so the question was, what effect does this Orange County DA's misleading report have on the family's civil rights case against the Fullerton Police Department? I think it will have a positive effect as far as the lawsuit is concerned. But it will have a negative effect because it smears a young man that had done really nothing to deserve 2 bullets into his heart. A young man that was, employed gainfully, continuously for over 14 years at U-Haul, that had 2 sons that looked up to him as a hero. They loved him, and now they've lost him. So we'll deal with that report in the way that we have to. We're just disgusted by it. We're disappointed by it. And we hope that whoever's in office next, even if it's him, take another look. Take another look at the truth. All right. Thank you, everyone.
We have a couple of community members, neighbors who wanted to talk for a minute or two.
We're not going this way.
Okay. Thank you so much, Garo. Well, on behalf of the Justice for Hector Coalition, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Erica Cervantes, and I am the Criminal Justice Legal Fellow at the Disability Rights Legal Center and a lifelong resident here at Fullerton. And I'd like to say a few words with regards to this incident. Let it be known that our community is in pain, angered, disgusted with how the Orange County District Attorney's Office has handled this tragedy. Let it be known that Hector Hernandez should be with us today, with his family, with his kids today. And let it be known that the community is watching, especially District Attorney Todd Spitzer. And we will keep demanding transparency and accountability. In other words, we will not stop demanding justice for Hector Hernandez. And so, as you may know, Todd Spitzer has recently released his findings regarding Hector's case, and he ultimately found that Officer Ferrell was justified in murdering Hector. But in response to this, we're not going to allow this. We're here, we put on this event to set the record straight. We're not going to tolerate the OCDA's attempts in defaming and dehumanizing Hector Hernandez and erasing his human existence. We're not going to tolerate the OCDA's attempts in pushing this false narrative. I'd like to thank Garo, but in pushing this false narrative, we're not going to allow that. We are going to take control and tell the real story of what happened that night. And lastly, we're not going to tolerate any killer cops to continue working on our streets. Let it be known that enough is enough. And so, I'd like to pass it on to anyone else that might like to speak. Everyone here, majority of everyone up here is part of the Justice for Hector Coalition. So please, if anyone else like to speak on behalf of this case.
All right. Yeah.
Introduce yourself and your.
Okay. I'm Father Dennis Grizz, pastor here of St. Philip Benizi Parish, which is about half a mile from here. So this is in our parish and in our neighborhood, and above all, I'm here on behalf of the community in this regard. Whenever a tragedy of this sort does happen, that it affects us all, and honestly, in the name of God, I am here, to be with the victims. And in this regard, I do want to say that I do want to apologize that I have not been here earlier. I mean, I was here a couple of months ago, but when this thing happened a year ago, I mean, there were friends of Hector's who are parishioners, and we talked and so forth. But honestly, I believed, in effect, the press at the time, or what was being reported at the time, and would say, well, it's complicated and so forth. And I do want to say, though, that unfortunately, after the last event that I was here with, and watching even members of the city council coming here and worried about that the truth was not really being said, saying, my God, I unfortunately, we're at a point where it's very hard to trust initial police reports anymore. That when people say that they feared for their lives, and yet were at a distance where The person had his hands up, was complying, and then was attacked by a dog, which I think all of us, our initial reaction would be to defend ourselves. It is really in the future a really big problem when you honestly cannot. The first reaction to any police report now becomes, "My God, is this true?" Further, I would say that this is, I've been here now for 5 years. We've had, the various issues with homelessness in our area, too, as it were. And this is not the only time that honestly one would say that the Fullerton police has not acted well. I mean, literally a week before, we had an incident last Tuesday where a homeless man with an ice pick, or what appeared to be an ice pick, lunged after our people at the line there for the St. Vincent de Paul Society. He called the police. It took over half an hour for them to get there. Why? Because the police was too busy, or was quite busy, impounding 5 RVs over by the train station, and that really becomes a problem of that. And one then is sort of, I suppose, in a sense, happy that by the time the police did come, that this poor man who was confused, who has some issues, who we've called in several times, and there doesn't seem to be ever anything that actually can be done for him, that he wasn't shot. Because if the police maybe had come earlier, it might have ended up worse than it did. And this then is a problem here. To say that somehow the Fullerton Police Department is any worse than any other police department here in Orange County or in this part of thing is probably unfair, I would think. But there are all sorts of issues here that really do have to be dealt with fundamentally. Just simply that this is a county which is largely urban with 34 municipalities, and they all play each other so that nothing gets done here. And this is repeatedly with the homeless question. A lot of inequality here. And then you have issues of inequality and so forth. That there are really many questions that really need to be done. I do hope that the state AG or the federal government does come here and look at this case, and even look at the training of the police. That in the end what they do is what they're trained to do. But I mean, is it logical to bring a police dog to a disturbance, a domestic disturbance? Why wasn't there a taser that would have taken care of this rather than 2 shots in the heart? All of these things, I mean, that they really deserve to be looked at. But even as we look at it, and Mother Teresa would do this, of saying, when talking about famines and so forth, they would say, well, when you guys get done drinking your brandy, that there might be some people who are still alive, thanks to folks like her group and so forth, to do. Here too, that at the end of the day, we can debate all this we want, but Hector is dead, and his kids, have no father. And again, to say that Hector was any different than anybody in this neighborhood, I think is horribly unfair, and certainly plenty of people here who would say that as well. Anyway, it's a tragedy. Hopefully something will be done in the end about this. But above all, let us remember that there is a man dead. There are kids who are now orphans as a result of this. God bless you all.
Okay, I just have a few words to say because I have a lot, but I need to minimize myself. My name is Bill Brown, and I live 4 houses down from Hector. He was a family friend, and he was like an uncle to my children. We witnessed everything that happened that night, and the only thing I really see in Todd Spitzer's release of his report that was truthful was that the officer was, in fact, in the area of 10 feet away from him, 10 feet away from Hector, when he saw him take the knife out to defend himself from the dog. And then when the officer yelled, hey, 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 took a step back, then he decided to negligently rapidly move forward and kill Hector to retrieve his dog, which is totally against the law. But the clear message that I take away from this from Todd Spitzer is he's telling us that there's one set of laws for law enforcement and another set of laws for the community. I had a lot of faith in him. and I was one of the people that just would have went along and believed the story until I saw for myself the chain of lies and cover-up, the events that took place after this happened. And so I'm going to do my best, along with the Hector Hernandez Coalition that we have formed with a bunch of great people, and we're going to do our best to get out to the public and acknowledge all the misleading information that Todd Spitzer has put out, and all the basically falsified information that he had put out to justify Hector being murdered unnecessarily.
Just one more speaker.
I can say a few words.
Oh, two more speakers, excuse me. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Bumaro Bulmado Vicente, how the folks call me Boomer. I am a member of Chicanos Unidos and also the policy director for Chispa. In addition, I also served as a police review commissioner for the city of Berkeley for 2 terms. And lastly, I'm a lifelong resident of Santa Ana. Hector's case is something that is kind of personal to me. In 2016, my old neighbor, Benito Osorio, was shot and killed by the Santa Ana Police Department. All of the officers who shot and killed Benito were exonerated. And so I'm here really to stand in solidarity with the friends and family of Hector Hernandez. One thing I also want to highlight, was that Hector was a father of 2. That's something that the DA is not saying. What the DA is trying to do is really just trying to criminalize and dehumanize Hector. Hector was no threat to Officer Ferrell. And I find that really disgusting how Spitzer is continuing this narrative of Latino men being threats to police officers and being threat to specifically, white residents and white officers. Here in California, the majority of people killed by police and law enforcement are young Latino male. And that's something that is still continuing under Todd Spitzer. When Todd Spitzer ran for district attorney, he made it very clear how different he was from his predecessor, Tony Rockakis. But every single day and every single month, we see how Todd Spitzer is just really like Tony Rockakis, how he's continuing this corruption and continuing rubber stamping police violence. How many officer-involved shootings have happened this year, and how many officers have been held accountable by Todd Spitzer? Clearly, there's not any officers that have been held accountable. And so for us, we're here really continuing the demand to hold officers accountable. Next year, there's an upcoming DA election, and it's a perfect opportunity for us to really talk about what police accountability means for us in Orange County. But also, us as residents, we're tired of the criminal justice system in Orange County. And we're hungry for change, and we're here demanding change. And so lastly, we want to stop demanding justice for Hector, and we're gonna continue to make this case relevant. Lastly, I want to highlight, the fact that we have the attorney for Kelly Thomas. Last month marked the 10th anniversary of Kelly Thomas's death, but yet 10 years later, this plague of police violence is still happening in Fullerton. How many more young individuals and how many males have to be killed by police officers before we demand real change and before change occurs? So, we're here and we're going to continue fighting. Thank you.
I don't know how much experience you all have with local politics, or also. My name is Vern Nelson. I run the Orange Juice blog. We see this over and over throughout all these questionable police. We see it over and over that they say that they feared for their lives, that the guy that killed somebody feared for their lives, and I was just really shocked to see Todd Spitzer pull that back out, like that's all he could find was Officer Ferrell feared for his life, and we've seen we have plenty of video evidence. He didn't fear for his life. He was far from what was happening. but it's a very big disappointment with Spitzer, because I expected that he would be more of a reformer. That's what he told me. I know the guy. He presented himself as a reformer. He'd be much better than Rakakis. And it's just another case where we're very disappointed with the guy who's in charge now, and we need to make voters need to pay attention. We need to make a change here. And anytime you hear he feared for his life, I know I'm a little emotional, but if you when you hear that, think twice, because it's bullshit. Thank you.